271 horsepower.
Wow, what a terrifying little car! Hello everybody and welcome to number 27. Today I'm back at PUG1 OFF, the guys that I went to recently with my 205 GTI to get some work done. And I want to answer a question that's been bugging me for ages. You all know that in my view, modern cars just can't hack it when it comes to being as fun to drive as an old car, as a 205 GTI for example, compared to the 208. But the question is, can a modified 205 GTI not be just as much fun to drive, but can it actually be better and quicker than a modern car? This is a pretty heavily modified 205 in terms of the power plant, and we'll go into that in a minute. But it's so light, 800 kilos, that to give the 208 a fighting chance, we've got one which has a tuning package from PUG1 OFF as well. This car actually develops currently 292 horsepower, and when the kit is complete and ready to go, Matt says it will be 300 easily. Okay, we'll start with Paul's car, the 205, and I do need a spec sheet here because these two cars have had a lot of work done to them. So let's open it up and have a look at what's underneath. So this is a 205 GTI. It was a 1990, yeah, 1990 originally, but mechanically there isn't really that much left of the original car. The donor engine is from a 306 GTI 6. As you'll know, it's one of the legendary GTIs from Peugeot, so already a very good basis, producing 167 horsepower, which would make this car fly. And you can get a package from PUG1 OFF where you get that engine transplanted into the car with the 6-speed gearbox, all pretty standard, a few tweaks, and you get 190 horsepower, and you can get that added to your 205 for £5 grand. This car has gone a little bit further. It's bored out to 2.1 litres, revs to 8,000 revs, and has on the dyno 247 documented horsepower in a car that weighs 820 kilos. It's got forged pistons and rods, cat cams, throttle bodies, bigger injectors, it's a ProTune ECU, Maniflow exhaust headers, 309 front wishbones for more negative camber, Bilstein B6s with eye-back springs, and the gearbox is the 6-speed, but it's got a different crown wheel and pinion. Now let's have a look at the 208. See, one of the things that becomes apparent even when you just open the bonnet is how much more solid this is. One thing to point out is that this pipe is non-standard. It's part of the development. They will have a proper pipe that's made up, but at the moment this is still sort of a development car. It has a hybrid turbo kit from PUG1 OFF. It's developed by them, it's still in prototype stage. It's running 1.1 bar at the turbo, so that shows you how much room there is actually to get more power out of it if the guys really want to do it. The clutch has had to be beefed up because the standard ones aren't really up to much. It's remapped, it's got a custom 3-inch exhaust, a Quaife limited slip diff, which is the same incidentally as the 30th anniversary, I think, limited edition cars came with. They came with the Thorson limited slip diff, which is essentially the same as the Quaife. In actual fact, this is quite heavily modified as well. Can this 205 live with the performance of this modern, even modified car, firstly, and secondly, can this actually live up to the fun and just the brilliance of the original 205? Let's take them out. So these 208s, well, out of the modern GTIs, God, it is loud. Out of the modern GTIs, I actually quite like it. I know the Fiesta ST is supposed to be amazing. I haven't driven one of those. But finally, it's Peugeot back to form, really, at least to some degree, after the debacle that was the 207. Interior is very nice. I really like the little wheel. It's quite fat here, but it's a little bit narrower at the top, so it's a bit like a compromise. It does still feel like a modern car. Steering is very light, and it does have, at least at these low speeds, that sort of aloof feel that I dislike so much. But because of the loud exhaust, at least it has a little bit more character than it would otherwise. You know, there is feel in that you kind of know what the front wheels are doing. It's better than it was, for example, in my M1 35i, for sure. Miles better. but still not great. Gear change is nice and short, stubby, a little bit notchy. I don't know why modern manufacturers come up with these disastrous, weird, big, oddly shaped gear levers. I do not see the point of that. It does move, but you have to be using the revs. There isn't really that much below 3, and to get the best out of it, you need to keep it at 5. So for a turbo engine, it's actually quite fun that you have to rev it. It's one of the first ones I've come across in my limited experience where you have to do that. That does make it more fun and more involving. Brakes massively over servoed for me, for my liking, but by modern car standards that's pretty much the way they are. The body is really controlled, and yet it rides well at these sorts of speeds. In town it's a little bit firm, but there's a tiny bit of tugging on the wheel when the full sort of 300 horsepower comes in. You can feel it pulling slightly, but it's not uncontrollable, it's not terrible, doesn't get in the way, but it's just reminding you that this is no normal 208. The value, you could get one of these for about 8 grand, I think. Add 5 grand, and for 13 grand you have you have a bit of a weapon. In terms of the way it goes down this road, it's really impressive. It just, loads of grip, loads of body control, the brakes are brilliant. Definitely much more fun than a standard version of one of these, and pretty impressive. I still think that I would be having more fun on this road in my 205 without having to go quite as quick, but nonetheless it's great. And for a turbo engine, it's so much more fun, and you actually have to work it to get the best from it. On the dual carriageway, I sort of gave it a few beans on this, and he was behind me, and he seemed to be able to keep up no problem. I have a feeling that 205, I think power to weight ratio it should be anyway, but I have a feeling it's faster than this. I think as a tuning package it's pretty good value really, especially considering that it's a complete hybrid turbo, an intercooler. There's quite a lot involved. It certainly isn't just a remap, and it does make it like a fun car to drive. We'll get into the 205 now and see how that fares. Technically it's not going to be anywhere near as good as this, the way this handles the bumps with that level of body control, but it will, I'm sure it will be more involving. So this also sounds meaty. It feels a bit more immediate. God, I can't tell you how different this is. It's just starting with the seating position. You're so much more upright, there's so much more light coming in. The steering is heavier, so on this 205 some of them can be power assisted, on this it isn't. It's got a shore shifter, steering feels heavy, it's got wider tyres than normal anyway, plus it's not assisted. It's firmer sprung I think than the 205, I'm just trying to work it out. It's not harsh, but if anything it's a little bit less floaty on the corners. Love it. You can heel and toe straight away. I found that difficult with that spacing. You would be able to do it on the 208, but on this it's just immediate. It's a kind of car this that takes a little bit of getting used to. It feels very different to my 205. It no longer has that sort of quite the same feeling of sort of lightness and nimbleness that mine does. So there's something a little bit loose in the linkage, although it's a short shift. There's a bit of movement there. Oh my god, it's vicious. Wow, wow. What a terrifying little car. Wow, you've really got to be careful with this thing. Once you go above 6,000, that's when it really starts pulling. I have to be honest with you, it's almost a little bit too much. Throttle response is immediate, and then it's so crisp. It's almost, as I said, for me, it's almost a bit too much. God, on a road like this anyway, it's a bit too much. Like on a dual carriageway or something, you'd probably be all right with it, but wow. Wow. It's like a buzzsaw. It's no slouch, but I'm telling you, this is definitely quite a bit faster if you keep it in the revs. It's also got a much broader spread of power, really, because it revs to 8,000. If you keep it above 5, it's got 3,000 revs that you can play with, which is actually more than the 208.
Let's just jump out of the video a second for a bit of reference here. So the 205 has 830 kilograms and 247 horsepower. That brings the power to weight ratio to 297 bhp ton. Now, that is pretty massive, really. Just for some reference, a 996 GT3 Porsche has 271 horsepower, and that is no slouch, and it's one of my favourite ever 911s.
I'm starting to get used to it a bit now, and wow! That 208, I'm really sorry, just cannot compete with this one bit. Just can't. It's impressive for a modern hatch, and also this is with the gearbox is really getting in the way. It needs to be looked at, the linkage, but even then, this is just unbelievable. The amount of feedback coming through the wheel, you know exactly what's going on with those front wheels, and it gives you a lot more confidence. There's just no frills about the way this handles. It just goes. I love the heft in the steering. I love the communication. And the chassis for a road like this is just perfect. It's firm. It's firmer, actually, than the 208. But it works. I absolutely love this little thing. And it is a complete weapon. I'd love to see what it does on a track day. Under full sort of power, it does tug a little bit here and there. More than the 208, but then I think it's just got more power. God, I'm almost tempted to go for the cheaper version of this for my car. For my 205. You know, you just get an engine and gearbox. You can get that for about £5 grand, you can get that done. Mind you, then you'd have to sort out the handling. Now this has exactly the same braking system as the 208, but obviously with loads less weight. When you need to use it, this just stops on a dime, and the brake pedal feels right. It doesn't feel like the moment you touch it, it engages. You can feel what the brakes are doing. You can modulate it much better. It's not actually that firm. Paul said it's really solid. I don't think it's that solid. It's just right. It's not that heavy, the brake pedal. It's wow, it really scrubs off speed when you need it to. And it is not twice, not three, it's 5 times the fun of the 208. The 208 may be technically a great car, but this is just unreal. Paul's there on the side of the road as I'm coming past. I wonder what he's thinking. What an immense little car. When I first got in it, I thought it was too much power, but power corrupts, and I'm now sort of thinking, well, actually it's alright. If I did it to my car, I don't know if the 190 if the 190 would be enough. 190 horsepower package. Might have to go for the full Monty. Let's be honest, with the Influenzo, with the Ferrari sucking me dry, I don't really think I have budget to do anything like this, but it's wishful thinking, really. Let's get the window down again. First gear you can't really use. It feels a bit like a motorbike. I don't really need to film anymore, but I'm going to carry on doing this road just for the hell of it. The 208 is an impressive car, and if you take that package into account, you buy a second-hand one, I think it's brilliant value. At around 13k, you have something which is just spot on as an all-round everyday car. This is not an all-round everyday car. My 205, you could argue maybe it would be. This isn't. It's quite firmly sprung. The engine is just like demonic. The brakes are quite fierce. It just wouldn't be something you'd want to use every day, and also steering lock on one side is limited because of what they've had to add clearance for the gearbox. But in terms of fun, this ranks up there with probably my top 5 cars that I've gone out with, and I've thought, wow, I absolutely love this. It's not for a long time that I've had quite as much fun as this in a car. Paul? It's absolutely immense. The confidence it gives you, because you know what it's doing, but it's controlled. And that's just like a chainsaw, that engine. It's just like... mental revenue. Yeah, I mean, it's quite rough at the top, which doesn't detract because it goes with the character of the car. It's not smooth, but it's rabid. Isn't it? It's just so aggressive. It's rabid. I love it. Anyway, thank you all so much for watching. And yeah, I don't know, I'm a bit speechless, but I think at the end of the day, I'm not going to repeat myself. I already said about the 208, but what happened was what I thought happened, and I'm biased because I like old cars. Maybe you wouldn't agree with me, but I'm telling you, if you drove this, you would not come away without your heart racing and without a big smile on your face. And with the 208, it can be fun, but it's just not the same thing. So again, thank you for watching. Please do subscribe, and I'll see you for the next video.